choice. Do you want to go good, best case or worst case? Do you want to be the angel or do you want to be the sexy devil?
You know what? I am the. I'll take the devil part of this one because I think I could argue it better. Go for the angel. I want to hear what is the best outcome for the Green Bay Packers this season, and I think it's got to be pretty high, right?
Now, the best outcome for the Packers this season is a Super Bowl. And
do you think they can win a Super Bowl? I mean, that's interesting. You really
I think
do.
they can get there. I think they can get there because there are some question marks in the NFC. I think they can find themselves amongst the elite. And the other part of it is I believe a lot in the jump, particularly for wide receivers, second year, third year, first year, second year. I think those jumps are meteoric, right? So for me, when you've got the youngest team in the league doing what they did in the playoffs and really playing with that level of confidence, I do think another year of progress, another year with them going into LaFleur's system and being able to get even more comfortable with it. Jordan Love knocking off the rust. Like if Jordan Love continues to be who he was for the back half of last season, he becomes a top 7, 8 quarterback. I should acknowledge, as we are taping this right now, there is not a new deal in place, but the Packers have made it clear that Jordan Love's not going to practice until that deal is in place. So this will quickly become of course they paid Jordan Love asinine amounts of money because you've got your young quarterback. So I love, frankly, where the young core of this team is developing. I think they can make another leap simply in having more experience with each other and being out of the shadow of Aaron Rodgers. There's nothing that holds this team back from being NFC Championship, which means to me Super Bowl.
Yes, and I mean, I do agree with a lot of the key points here, especially, when you think about Super Bowl at the Packers, well, they beat the Cowboys on the road last year, and they led the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco at the 2-minute warning of that game. They were really close, and look, they were going to go on. If they win that game, they're going to go on to play the Detroit Lions. Well, they won at Detroit on Thanksgiving. It's not crazy to think that they could have won that NFC Championship game, too, if that did come to pass. So I do get the upside. I get the angel side of this that you're taking. The devil side, as we've talked about this offseason, I can't shake it. This is a team that was 2-5 last year. This was a team that we both watched Jordan Love really, really struggle against the Raiders, who, hate to tell you, Fitz, not a very good team last year. And he looked awful, legitimately awful, to the point that I led off my preview in the Packers talking about what's now pretty famous, Brian Gutekunst, their general manager, coming out and saying, this is a Big Ten games for us to figure out what we have at Jordan Love. He wasn't negative about Jordan Love. He said a lot of good things about Jordan Love, but he set the table of, hey, we don't know what we got, and we got 10 games to figure it out. Well, Jordan Love's balls out from there, right? He becomes one of the really exciting quarterbacks in the NFL. I think he had 16 touchdowns, 1 interception in their last 10 games, something like that. Looked great, but it's still a small sample. And, the contract thing is out there. I think by the time, look, we're taping this on Tuesday, it's probably going to get settled very quickly. They want Jordan Love to be there for the long term, and they're going to pay him as such. But that does change things. And And the one thing I do worry about the Packers is less the offense. I think the offense is going to be really good. I do think Jordan Love, what he put on tape, even in a small sample, I think that's legit. Maybe he takes a small step back, but I think he's very good. But let's not forget, this was a 9-8 team last year. They don't make the playoffs if the Seattle Seahawks beat the Pittsburgh Steelers at home at week 15, I believe it was. They were very close to not even making the playoffs. So we're not having this discussion. And I just wonder if we're overinflating them because of the playoff wins, which we do. We do that, as I've talked about. NCAA tournament comes around in basketball terms. Some team makes the Final Four. We're like, oh my God, Florida Atlantic is awesome. And then they lose in the first round next year. We overestimate what it means to win a playoff game or two. Beating the choking Cowboys, does that really matter that much? And the one thing I do worry about on the field with the Packers is their defense. Look, we all blame Joe Barry. Packers fans wanted Joe Barry fired for a long, long time. And finally, Matt LaFleur does it. Brings in Jeff Hafley from Boston College. He was their head coach. Maybe their defense just isn't that good. They got a lot of highly drafted guys, but I don't know if they have any superstars necessarily on that defense. Maybe the defense just isn't that good. The NFC North is going to be good. Maybe the Bears even surpass them. It's not out of the range of possibilities here. And maybe we're just left a little cold with the Packers and say, you know what? We were so excited about them. And it wasn't based on that much. It was based on a couple months of good play and a win against the choking Cowboys in the playoffs. Maybe we're just out in front of our skis a little bit with the Packers.
So, Frank, are you a big game show guy?
Oh, yeah, here and there. Yeah,
okay, so I'm a big, when I wake up in the morning while I'm making my egg whites and feeding Annabelle, I always turn the TV on in the kitchen. And it always goes to either the Game Show Network or it goes to Bar Rescue, right? That's just how my day starts. I'm either got John Taffer yelling at me or I'm on game shows. But there's one thing I do hate about, and I love almost every game show, but there's one thing I do hate. I hate when you're watching, like, for example, Family Feud, and you lose the first round, you lose the second round, and then what Steve Harvey always say, you're trailing, you're down 280-0, but he's like, doesn't matter because the game is still, it all comes down to this. And then in the third round, everybody, like, you'll see a team that's had the worst answers in history suddenly win and advance. And I always look at that and say, man, that's a pretty dumb way to do things. What you just described with the Packers is a little bit how we are judging right now their season, because you are right. We don't think about 9-8. We don't think about the line that their season sort of ran on. We don't think about how close this was to possibly being a disaster. Like, we don't think about any of that because we weigh the wins they got so disproportionately to the rest of what happens. It's the same thing when we get to the Cowboys that I'll say in the opposite direction. We overweigh so much with the playoffs that it skews the way we see a team coming in. So you're right. I hadn't thought about it. Your devil is actually absolutely right that because of the way they won the games that they won at the end of the year, we're overhyped on Green Bay. I think the devil actually, just like devil went down to Georgia, the devil actually just won this battle. Like, the devil beat the angel, Frank.
And to be clear, I do think the Packers are good. Like, I do, but I'm just telling you, I can see the downside here. I can see us being in mid-December, late December, saying, man, we really should have looked under the hood a little bit more instead of just being like, oh my God, they blew out the Cowboys. Well, yeah, they did. People beat the Cowboys in the playoffs. That's kind of what happens. That's the deal. But they're a very, very interesting team because you could talk me into, hey, we're sitting here in December and they're 13-2. Okay. Like, that's not crazy. 13-2 is a little bit much, but you know what I mean? This could be one of the NFL's best teams and wouldn't blow me away. But again, I don't think we're talking enough about the possible downside here. We're just talking about the ceiling.